Pankaj Saxena, he's a very well-known scholar of history, sociology, this temple architecture, and many things, Indian art. So he's deeply interested mostly in cultural anthropology, evolutionary biology, and ecology. And he has started this new program of Temple 2. So he has visited multiple temples across the country. Um, he takes people on the temple tour and actually explains it. So that's a quite an experience, I would say. And I know him I knew him as a co-founder and director of Brhat. And many of you who are in the campus will know that we have a very long and deep relationship with Brhat. They have done 2 talk series already. We have other collaboration also. So, and his latest book is this Swayambodh and Shatrubodh, Hindu View of Self and the World. And it's a highly acclaimed book. And I'm not speaking on behalf of other news reports. I have actually read the book. So I can say it's worth reading. It's a good book. And so over to Pankajji. And so we have 3 talks today. The first one is Devalaya, Temple as Divine Architecture, which is now. Then after a short break, we will have Vigraha, Symbols and Meanings of Iconography and Sculpture. And in the afternoon from 4 p.m. in the same venue, we will have Mandir, Temple as a Living System. So over to
Pankaj. Thank you, Arnabji, IIT Kanpur and all of you for being here. Temple has been one of my passions when I started delving more deeply and more experientially into Indic institutions. I was reading about them since I was 9 or 10 years old. I got to know them through second-hand experience of my guru when at 18 I met him. But the real experience of them was when he initiated me, and second, when I started going to different places in India, different institutions in India, and I started experiencing them for what it is. Because my guru is a voracious reader, I also read at a breakneck speed when I started reading. Still I consider it's stupid to give them percentages. 80% of what I know doesn't come from books. 80% of what I speak here and everywhere else is from my experiences with life, with people, with institutions. Because that's how reality is. No matter how long books you write, no matter how much you read, very little about life is what you can actually know by reading. So, temple as an institution is more so. And it is the nature of Indic institutions, Hindu institutions. They will actually weave in a lot of disciplines, a lot of subjects in one institution. Not just lot. If you approach one institution correctly, if you approach one discipline correctly and in depth, you actually will have a wide knowledge of almost more than 80 to 90% of the institutions, disciplines, concepts, siddhantas that are there in Hindu cosmology, Hindu world, Indic world. So this is how it is. Temple is the center of it, at least since 1800, for 16 to 1800 years, it has been the most central institution of the social life in India. Even now today, when the world has become, as they say, use the word modern, even then, temple does remain a very important institution. For 16 and 1800 years ago, why? We'll discuss as we go on, but at least for 2000 years or 1800 years or so, it has been there. So we'll try to understand what it is. Devalaya is the word we use. In North India, we most commonly use the word mandir, which is not wrong. But I have differentiated between Devalaya as the first concept in the first lecture, and mandir is the last one, because mandir is more of an ecosystem, a place where we gather to do different things. Devalaya very literally and directly means abode of the gods, abode of the god. The very literally it means that's where the deity lives, that's where the god lives. So that's why, for more of its symbolic purposes, the first lecture I thought of naming it as more as closely as Devalaya. Because there is a lot of symbolism involved. And I am fond of saying that when you start seeing your own civilization and culture symbolically, you are already at a one remove. Because if you are very deeply in contact with your own culture and civilization, you don't see symbols, you see truth directly. When you forget some things, when one layer has been added, one layer of ignorance has been added, एक परत चढ़ जाती है जो धूल की, उसके बाद you need some cleaning. That cleaning is symbolism. But for what it is, even I had to go through that purpose. Everyone has to go through that process, and that's why I use symbols. It's very useful. They are very useful. Symbolism is very useful. But we have to know, because when my grandmother talked about,
we did not get the word. When you say when you have to use symbolism, it means you are.
you're already with your culture and civilization. You're already at one remove from your culture and symbol.
Okay.
You're already at one remove. Because when my grandmother talked about mandir, she said, "Devta bhuke hain." She didn't add the clause, "Hamari manyata hai ki devta bhuke hain." Because this clause is colonial. We are trying to explain ourselves to those who do not understand our culture, and we assume that they are everywhere. They have made many of us like them, and so that every time we have to speak about our own culture and civilization, we have to explain it. So, as sad as that reality is, it is where we are. And instead of just refuting it, we should also embrace it, in the sense we should explain to the next generation what it means, and hope and work towards a place, a situation where they are also able to reach that stage where my grandmother was. I'm very fond of saying, maybe one day I'll write about her, that she never went to school beyond 5th standard. Everyone in my family, extended family, 30 people, completed at least, because my particular community completed at least 12th standard. Most of them went to college. But I said, and I told all of them, one of them is actually the CEO of Bharti Cement, my chacha, and I keep telling them that my grandmother, who never went to school beyond 5th, was the most educated person in our whole extended family. She still remains to be so. What that means through this temple, this institution, we'll also understand. So one of the first books that I read about temples, there is a very famous work. If you try to Google it, search it, Stella Kremrish, another foreigner, the Hindu temple. Simply, she has titled it the Hindu temple. Now, one of the rare foreigners who doesn't see our systems from the colonial or the Western eye, who sees it as it should be seen. So I first stumbled across a book which was very pictorial, in which there are a lot of pictures about temples and sculptures by George Michel, another great scholar of Hindu temple architecture. But there were just so many pictures, there was no great depth in that book. So when I picked up Stella Kremrish, I thought, as soon as I open it, she will talk about this great temple and that great architecture, monumental architecture, exquisite sculpture and all. But surprisingly, in first 100-150 pages, she is only talking. In the first 100 to 150 pages, she is only talking about rituals. And I was shocked that why is she talking about all of this? Why is she talking about not, maybe I've gotten the wrong book, but I kept looking at the title, but it was the Hindu temple. But Hindu temple at its core, like any other Hindu institution, is very much about rituals. So here it is. So what it is in principle, you don't need to understand all of the different names of the deities that is written here. Do not bother about details. See, this is an era of not just internet, as I'm being told, although I don't understand it very much, AI. So you can always Google, you can always ask your assistants, virtual assistants, what the details are. That's not a problem. There is no shame in it also. You don't need to carry all that panditya here. That era is gone. Wisdom is what is necessary. That information is no longer a load. Earlier it was a vocation, now it is not a vocation, there is no shame in it. So all these details, do not bother, I'm just explaining to you the concepts. What happens is, she describes, our Shastras describe what happens when you build a temple, when you create a temple. So what happens is, most commonly, you would clear a piece of land which is full of forests, jungles, right? A lot of woods. So when you clear it, they consider it as rightfully so. And that's how ecological civilization we are. They consider it as great violence against nature, against the forces that reside there. So that they say the place is angry, the kshetra is angry, and that is represented in this Vastu Purush, who is wild and flailing, all his arms and legs, going in all directions, throwing the deities who are trying to pin him down at one place, throwing them here and there. So you have to, through ritual, you have to appease Vastu Purush and make him calm. And after that, he becomes, he is upside down now, and then he turns the side, and you see his face. But how do you do it? There are many rituals prescribed, but they are not just rituals. For example, they say, as many trees as you cut to create a temple, you have to plant there or somewhere else 10 times more. So here is a psychological principle embedded in our very own construction techniques, that as much as you disturb the nature, you have to actually fortify it even more. So what does this represent? This is an acknowledgement that the sheer act of human building is an act of violence against nature. It disturbs nature as it is, and so it is our duty, if we are making an imbalance at one side, we have to balance it at the other. In many ways, it actually flies very neatly into the concept of Rina. Rina is what? That just by the sheer act of being born, by mere existence, we are actually under debt for so many things, to our parents, to nature, to rishis, to deities. So this is also an act. Just by the existence of a temple, there is a rin on it, on those who are creating it, to actually create more balance in nature. There are many stories also to that effect, but if we go into it, we'll need entire day. So we'll proceed. But this is the temple in principle, is this, that you clear a piece of land. It is a great act of disturbance. You have to appease it, you have to balance it. And so this principle of balance. See, dharma is eternal balance, always, in all times. Chir santulan, dharma, chir santulan. So wherever there is imbalance, you create balance. That's why if it is going in one direction, the learned people will recommend this thing here. But if it is going in this direction, wrong in this direction, they will recommend something opposite. Those who are dogmatic people, they will take a certain verse of a text and they will claim it as universal. The tendency is very Abrahamic, is very Western, but sadly, in last few hundred years or so after the British, you can see it a lot in our own people also. They will quote one piece of text and they will quote it as universal. But Sanatana Dharma is always dependent upon context. Why? Because it is always about balance. It is Chir Santulan, Dharma, Chir Santulan. So that is the principle that you see here. So imagine one of the most concrete of structures. Abhi to humne banana arambh bhi nahi kiya. Abhi we have just cleared the land, and they have established one of the most basic and fundamental principles about human beings, about life, as also in temple. So all of Hindu institutions are in effect reflections of life, of universe as it is lived. So in almost all disciplines you will find that. I did not start to study sculpture at first. I was mostly interested in architecture, monumental architecture. That was my interest. But such is the design of Hindu disciplines that if you go deep into architecture, it's impossible to understand it if you don't study sculpture. If you start studying sculpture, it is impossible to understand it without studying iconography. What do these 16 hands mean? Why 16 hands at first place, which we'll go in second lectures, and why all these weapons. But that you cannot understand until you study what is called as Pratima Lakshan, or iconography in English. What is the greatest text of iconography? That's Natya Shastra, the first and the oldest text. It's about drama, it's about dance, it's about many other things, but actually that's what you have to study. And if you study Natya Shastra, by the time the commentators come to Shantaras, it has already become a supremely spiritual text, just like any Upanishad. So they will take you, Rajneesh Mishra, not the Osho one, Rajneesh Mishra, the disciple of the great Kapil Kapoorji, he uses one sentence which I am quite fond of quoting everywhere. It explains everything. Every Hindu discipline takes you from Bhed to Abhed. That's the nature of all the Hindu, no matter what you study. Something as concrete as a stone is capable of transporting you to the most abstract realms of philosophy, and that is how. Now there are different concepts of temple as a Purush. Now how to There are many such concepts of temple as a Purush. So what does it mean, temple as a Purush? In these times, I will refer to the great Ayush Adda in these times, and her beautiful video just a few days ago on Mile Sur Mera Tumhara, and how it would have been impossible to make such a thing now in this politically woke climate where everyone is very conscious about the insults, perceived insults, and the privileges that are always there. So similarly, to talk about Purush, immediately whenever I talk about Purush, somebody stands up, why not Istri? Then I have to explain, it's not about gender, and not everything is about gender. Purush here stands for the concept Siddhanta. It has nothing to do, they are just using prototypes. Because our way is to take understanding of what is very difficult, what is esoteric, to take you from where, which is very familiar, which is very easy on our eyes, on our senses, start from there, then transport you to the most abstract and the deepest of philosophy. That's why they use the prototypes. So here, temple as concept, temple as Purush, Vastu Purush is the grand concept. Here, if you see this is a prototype of a Dravid temple, and here the entire profile of a standing Vastu Purush is given, in which the Shikha is and the tuft of here, it is compared to Stupi, where the Biju Purak and the Kalash is there. And after that there is Griva. Griva is similar, the exact word is used in temple, जो बीच का जो part है, कंठ ग्रीवा कई जगह उसको कहते हैं. Then there is Jangha, the main part of the temple is Jangha. After that there is Jagati, then there is Adhisthana. So पूरा जो human body है उसकी तरह उन्होंने sanctify किया है. Why is that so? Because the Garbhagriha, where the deity is, where the Vigraha of the deity is, of course that's the most sacred part of the temple. But they don't want to convey the sense that any part of the universe is profane, actually. So there are, in a Hindu universe, there are places which are more sacred, places which are less sacred. There is nothing which is not sacred. That's why they have used it, the philosophy like this. That of course there are gradients where places and times which are more sacred, more divine than others, but that does not mean that there are places and times which are excluded from the divine, from the sacred. So that's why they have used it. The entire temple will be different parts of the body in many different ways. This is the standing profile, then this is the lying down profile. So here, once again, they have taken a Dravid temple. The feet is the Gopuram. So many North Indians still think that the Gopuram is the temple. It is not so. The highest part, the very colorful part, the long part, that is just the gate. They like to make their gates very colorful and high and big. And we tend to go there because of all the restrictions. As we moderns would think, we don't enter the temples, we take shots and we come back, so we think this is the temple. It's not so. You enter here, the Garbhagriha is actually, it's much smaller than the Gopuram, it's far inside. So that is Gopuram is related to feet. And then this profile is connected to the various chakras in our body. Human bodies, our spine is equated to the 7 chakras that exist in Hindu darshan, Hindu philosophy, from Mooladhara to Sahasrara. So the journey actually is supposed to, once you touch Mooladhara, you are supposed to raise your level of consciousness until you reach the in front of the Garbhagriha, where the energy is at highest at the level of Sahasrara. So when you have darshan, it is it is an equivalent of while you're sitting and meditating, and your energy is at the level of Sahasrara, at the highest level. So this is the equivalence. This equivalence will come in at many places. We'll understand exactly in technical detail what it means to have darshan, what it means to have darshan in a temple. Here the whole chakras are there. This is also the standing profile में भी आपको ऐसे ही दिखेगा, just like lying down. शिखर के उसमें भी you will have the same mapping of the chakras. Now, what is a temple? When in 2016, I guess, around 9 to 10 years ago, when I went and interviewed Dr. R. Nagaswamy, is one of the greatest people in architecture, history of architecture, archaeologist he was. He also got Padma Bhushan, I guess, Padma Bhushan or Padma Shri, if I am not confused. He also gave some critical evidence in Ram Janmabhoomi. So I said, what is a temple? Would you consider this a temple? I gave an example. So then he asked me, what is a temple? So then this conversation went on like this. He said, temple is this, there is a deity, there is a garbhagriha, and there is a mandap around it, and that is a temple. And he said, remove the mandap. Would it still be a temple if the deity is there, if the archaka is there, if the archana is there? I said, yes. He said, remove the antaral, the another part also. But the rituals go on and the deity is there. Would it still be a temple? Yes. He said, now remove the temple itself. The vigraha is there and the puja is going on. Would you still consider it a temple, a vigraha under a tree? And then I realized, I said, yes. So temple in its most core form is vigraha. Vigraha which is under archana, which is under worship, which is alive. What does it mean to be alive? When all the rituals that are attendant upon the deity, which are conducive to the nature of the deity, that is going on, then it is considered to be a temple. That's why a murti under a tree suffices as a temple. Had that not been so, we would not have survived. The temple as a system would not have survived during the Middle Ages. This is the great adaptability of Sanatana Dharma also, that while creating the largest and the most sumptuous of structures, it is also capable of surviving without any of it, without any of the paraphernalia. So, Deepa Doraiswamy says in a wonderful book that we used to, which will come in the last lecture, that we did not used to build temples at the center of cities. Our towns came up around the temples. And so I extend it to another level that you do not, when Ram Janmabhoomi controversy came, that how are they consecrating, when the temple is not complete and that and this and that, and so many people objected to it. So actually the thing is that the temple comes around the vigraha, not the other way around. You do not place the vigraha in a building, the building comes up around the deity. So whether it is there or whether it is not, that's not, it does not matter much. If the deity is under worship, if the archana is going on, that much is enough. So, but we also expand it. So the other part is that although we are capable of surviving in the bare minimum, but we are also a great civilization. So we expanded also into the largest, as big it can be. So we created various parts of a temple. So the most important part, which is at the Brahmasthana. Brahmasthana is the dead center of a square piece of land, very simply. So no complexity there. That is Garbhagriha. At the dead center of Garbhagriha is the vigraha of the deity placed. So that is Garbhagriha, which is very, center of the temple. Just before Garbhagriha is Antaral. If you have gone to some ancient temples, you will see that there is a place where we gather. Mandap is where the devotees gather, we gather. We can go only up to, for example, if you use this, do not mistake the other part of it, but if this is the Garbhagriha and that is the Mandapa, then this would be the Antara. So you could come to here are the priests officiating between the deity and the devotee. So this is how it is. Antral is where the priest resides, Garbhagriha is where the deity resides, Mandir is where the devotees come and gather. So very simply that. Now as bigger temple, you can add more mandapas to it. For example, the Ram temple, once again, because it has been in our consciousness, of all our consciousness for some time. Initially the plan was to build 2 mandapas. But when the decision came, they were so euphoric that they added another. So when you add another, what happens is that there is a rule that no shikhar, in North Indian style at least, can be larger than the Garbhagriha. Mandap can never be larger than the shikhar of the Garbhagriha. So that's why you see the design of the Ram temple is a little skewed. The Garbhagriha is overshadowed by the huge mandapas. Because what happens is that this is one mandapa. If you want to add another, this will become bigger. Then another smaller than it, Ardha mandapa, and then another even much smaller, Mukh mandapa. So generally there are 3. And the same as you do here, same you can do on all 3 sides. वो हम देखेंगे staggering कैसे होता है. That's another technique. We create more space. So that is how the mandapa is. So what happened is that earlier they planned for 2. But when the decision came, they added 3rd. So as the 3rd became very big, the Garbhagriha, proper Garbhagriha, would have become so big that it would be difficult architecturally, engineeringly, from the point of view of engineering, it would have been more difficult to, you know, keep it in place without certain other modern contraptions. Then you could not have the shikhar that a usual temple is. Then it will become more like dome type. That's why they changed it, and now it is, you know, very narrow. But that's how I'm just explaining to you what happens in different parts of the temple: Garbhagriha, Antaral, Mandapa. Here there are many different parts of the temple. Now once again, ये जो सब लिखा है, don't get you know, lost in the details. Once again, it's not necessary. If you are a doctor and you do not know all the bones in the body, it might be, you know, wrong, it might be dangerous. But similar, it's not similar in temple architecture. If you study some of the technical books, they will describe at least in a pillar 19 to 25 parts. Every part, of course, has a name, which is very clearly defined. All the books in Western authors, scholars who write books on Hindu temples, they 90% of the time keep discussing about this part, Kumud hai, Kamal hai, ye hai, wo hai. And at the end, as they soon reach Garbhagriha, they say there is a cult image of Vishnu inside. End of the matter. No discussion on that. No discussion on the nature of the deity, of the kshetra, of the temple, of the sampradaya, nothing. They are not, because they are detaching the building from the living system that it is. But that's not how we see it. So if we start seeing it that way, we are seeing it in the colonial way, we should not. So all these details, they are not as important, because once again now you Google it, you will find all those names instantly on your phone. What is more important is how it is seen. Here you see in this, this is Kandariya Mahadev Khajuraho. We will also see the images of great temples later on in the good images of other great temples later on in the lecture. But here this is one of the most exquisite temples that survive in North India. It's a miracle it survived, because my theory is I extrapolate on certain historical facts, but the Chandelas of Khajuraho, they built this great temple city, then within a few years, 2-3 years after it was completed, they take a decision, shift it, hide it, leave 10 to 15 priests and their families there, and then shift to Mahoba. So this is in Madhya Pradesh, which is at the border, just near the border of Uttar Pradesh. And then you cross the border, there is Mahoba. Because at that time, Vidyadhar had defeated a lot of Islamic kings. I think Ghazni or some great king they had defeated. But they knew that they were going to come back. So they were great kings they had defeated. They also knew they were going to come back. After this, they hit Khajuraho, went to Mahoba. They also created great temples in Mahoba, but not as many as that. Mahoba, once again the attackers came, invaders came. Everything got destroyed. Mahoba is now in ruins. There are some parts which remain, but otherwise it is in ruin. But Khajuraho got lost to humanity. Lost in the sense the locals always knew. The puja kept going on, the archana kept going on until the British discovered it in 19th century. But due to that act, I feel it, I very consciously feel it as a conscious act of Chandelas, that they did kripa on us, left one city perfectly fine of North Indian architecture. Like this. There are 15 to 16 examples as exquisite. If you go near, every inch is covered with sculpture, which is not overdone. So if you go to Karnataka, Hoysala temples, some Chalukyan temples, they are overdone. Overdone in the sense that every single little inch is there is some sculpture. So it's also beautiful. I'm extremely fond of them also. But here you see it's not overdone. The proportions are absolutely as beautiful as they used to be in Gupta age, much before Chandelas. But every single inch is covered in architecture. The scale, the profile, the amount of stone that they have used, the amount of every architectural technique that they have used in this temple, this is the greatest example of all of it, is absolutely exquisite. Anyone has been to Khajuraho? So many times. So 3-4, but all of you should, tomorrow we are going to nearby temples. I hope that next time we go to some great cluster like Khajuraho also. And Kalinjar. And then we can do study in situ of all the principles that we are discussing here. Because it is more about, about architecture and living systems. In Kanpur, the temples near Kanpur, you will still be able to see the principles. But the sculpture to kuch bacha hi nahi. It's all removed now. So that we cannot see much, but architectural principle we will be able to see. So this remains one of the most important examples that are still extant. These are various parts of a temple. Here, if it is clear, there is Kalash. Kalash के नीचे ये जो ribbed wheel है, it's called as आमलक. आमलक in आमले से ही जो आता है, आमले जैसा लगता है वो. So that आमलक. And then there is शिखर. जो गर्भगृह अंदर है, बाहर से उसको हम नीचे हम जंगा बोलेंगे, ऊपर हम शिखर. उसका जो टावर है, that is शिखर. शिखर को कई तरह से आर्टिकुलेशन करते हैं उसका, that we learn later on. उसमें छोटे छोटे शिखर भी आते हैं. ये पार्ट जो है ये जगती है जिसके ऊपर वो रिसाइड कर रहा है. एंड देन उसके नीचे अधिष्ठान है. अधिष्ठान क्यों बिल्ड करते थे? जनरली ऑल द ग्रेट टेम्पल्स ऑन अ ग्रेट प्लेटफॉर्म, वेन एवर द फ्लड्स कम, सो दैट द टेम्पल इटसेल्फ इज नॉट अंडर वाटर. इतना तक ऊपर रहे कि बाढ़ आने पर पूरा टेम्पल इज अबव वाटर. सो दे यूज टू बिल्ड एन अधिष्ठान. अधिष्ठान का भी ये है ना. अधिष्ठान इज जनरली प्लेन, बट खजुराहो दे रियली वेंट टू द होल हॉल. Like the journey which I described that earlier, the journey is from Mooladhar to in Chakra to Sahasrar. So in Khajuraho, if you go to Lakshman temple, and a lot of people are fond of talking about so many things about erotica and Khajuraho, and they are because we have become so ignorant that either we are shy that oh yeah it must be an aberration, or we start giving absolutely absurd explanations that humans were not reproducing enough in that, so they were trying to encourage. And I have read that this is officially in books about sculpture and architecture, which are taught in colleges and universities. Yeah. So this is how lost we are about our own culture. We let this happen, and ये लिखा हुआ है वहाँ पर. So first of all, just to, if you are not aware of the first part, far from being an aberration, I have been to more than 600 temples in every single corner of India where erotica is. It is a very integral part of Hindu temple architecture. It's not an exception at all. And they are not trying to encourage or anything. They are just simply because temple is a replica of the universe itself, of the cosmos itself. Whatever happens in life, they will show it there in different parts of the temple. It's supposed to be as a replica of the universe. So just like war is there are mundane activities. So on the outermost side, on Adhishtan, on the walls of Adhishtan in Lakshman temple and Kandari temple Khajuraho, you will see all kinds of these scenes. Erotica is there. Along with erotica, there is war scenes, violence, and mundane scenes like somebody is doing daily chores, beauties picking something from her feet and looking herself in the mirror, and all these things happen on the outer sides of the wall. So as you enter the temple, they try to show you what samsara is. As the direction is towards, as you keep moving inside, more and more of these scenes become more and more refined. So for example, you see less of sex and violence. You see more of the deities which are, for example, Ashtadikpalas, the smaller deities. As you go more inside from Mandap, you see different forms of the deity who resides in the Garbhagriha reflected. And as you reach the Garbhagriha, there is just one. So the direction is once again from, to quote Rajneesh Mishra, from Bhed to Abhed, from Sansara to inside. It's Indriya Nigrah. The process itself is Indriya Nigrah. That is how they have built it, that is how they have designed it. So that is the process that is taking place here. So here on the walls you will see most of that erotica and other scenes. As you go here, you will see some other scenes and some form of the deity in the main ratha. So this is called ratha. ये जो main niche आपको दिख रही है, ये रथ इनको बोला जाता है, और इस रथ में आपको main deities भी दिखेंगे. ये जो अंतराल है, this is the अंतराल. तो जो अंदर हमने देखा था इससे पहले, इसको ये अंतराल को आप बाहर से देखोगे तो ये वाला पार्ट है, where गर्भगृह and mandap are meeting. So just to signify meeting also, confluence also, यहाँ पर erotic sculpture फिर से होता है. Just to signify that two parts are meeting. So a lot of erotic sculpture in Khajuraho that we'll see. ये तीन, ये जो not very clearly, but here you can see these three parts में आपको जो most famous erotica है वो यहाँ दिखेगा. हाँ, once again the percentage of erotic sculpture in Khajuraho, as some scholars put it, is 8%. 8 art. 92% is not erotica. But if you take a guide, God forbid, they will show you only that. So that's why never take a guide in all these temples. You are better off, you will not know some great tales, that's okay, but if you see it through their eyes, God forbid. One of my great friends, Ramakrishna Kongalaji of tourism, you might have come across his handle also. He's in Gwalior tourism architecture, one of the greatest scholar on iconography. He's creating a batch of these travel guides who are very good in this, who know the entire history of Islamic destruction, entire history of every Purana. They make them run through, remember all the Puranas, all the Agamas. He makes them run through it. He makes them learn through all of iconography. So in 10 years, we expect to see good guides everywhere, but uske pehle kripa karke guide na kariye. Another view of Shikhar. This is once again Kandari Temple, Khajuraho also. So this is the profile. ये ऊपर कलश है. Kalash has very great importance. We'll go into it. इसके बाद. This is Amlak. This is Shikhar. Small Shikhar. ये open window है. Open window को भी we'll discuss later on. See, this part is not necessary. यहाँ से आप देखेंगे ये open window है. There is another terminology, though how you divide temples. Sandhar and Nirandhar. Sandhar is where the Pradakshina path is inside the temple. तो खजुराहो में अगर आप जाएंगे तो गर्भगृह है. गर्भगृह के ये जो बाहर का है स्क्वायर, इसके अंदर एक और स्क्वायर है और इसके बाहर एक प्रदक्षिणा पथ है. तो जिन टेम्पल में अंदर प्रदक्षिणा पथ होता है, अंदर परिक्रमा कर सकते हैं, दैट्स कॉल्ड एज सांधार. जिनमें नहीं होता है वो निरंधार. तो इसके बाहर ये है. अब ये जो पार्ट है, आपने मंडप बनाया, स्टैगरिंग हम बाद में समझेंगे. वंस यू हैव बिल्ट द टेम्पल, उसके बाद यू कैन क्रिएट अ विंडो और यू कैन नॉट क्रिएट अ विंडो. यहाँ it's a completely open window. Somewhere they put, lattice work, very small window, very small openings also, but lattice work there. Sometimes that is also not there. So mandap can be of many kind. Now let us go into some symbolism, some basic symbolism of temple. Temple is a sacred mountain. Just like I said, if you enter from the front and if you go towards the Garbhagriha, it's a process of Indriya Nigrah. It's a process of calling back your senses. That's why from Sansar, from many to one. Similarly, temple in its profile is considered to be a sacred mountain, which is very easy to see. It's also built like a mountain. Mountains are like this. There is one peak, which is the highest, but around the peak there are certain jagged peaks. It's not a simple cone as we used to draw when we were kids. As we grew, yeah, it has more jagged peaks. And so these are the other jagged peaks in it. They are sometimes called as, this is Vesar architecture in Karnataka. In North India, the half shikhars are called as Urushranga. So there is shikhar, half shikhar is called as Urushranga. That is fractal geometry. We will also try to understand what it is. Fractal geometry is reflected everywhere in temple. Why it is called a mountain? Because in Hindu Shastras you will come across the concept of temple is Mount Meru. Many times. Now what is Mount Meru? Mount Meru is not a real mountain, in a sense not a physical mountain. It is a mountain of self-realization, of your own real self. As you are supposed to climb that mountain, you are supposed to attain moksha. You climb various states of consciousness and ultimately attain moksha. So this is climbing a temple. You don't actually climb it. As you take your eyes from the bottom towards the top, that is a process that is supposed to happen. In one of the FTPs, none else, I was asked this question, तो फिर तो सबको मोक्ष होना चाहिए जो सब मंदिर गए हैं. So this is the level to which we have come to. I had to explain. They hope that by creating these mechanisms, you do actually attain those states, but it is not necessary that everyone who visit the temple will become that. Otherwise, सब ज्ञानी होते. And if it had been that simple, our government would have forced आर्मी आती, सबको इस कमरे में ले जाती, टेंपल में ले जाती, सबको मोक्ष होता. एंड ऑफ स्टोरी. मोक्ष हुआ मतलब कभी जन आगे नहीं हुआ. एंड यू कुड एक्चुअली डिक्रीज द पॉपुलेशन इन दिस. More people getting moksha means, less people on earth, which can solve a lot of problems in a very peaceful way. So maybe the gods are listening. So, but it's not as simple as that. But this is a process which is supposed to happen. Garbhagriha is the sacred womb. Why is Garbhagriha? So when I was a kid, I felt like, and a lot of Christians pick on that. A lot of missionaries pick on that. They say, "Arey, you should come to church." So I was never very, at that time my family was not very, deracinated. So I said, why? They say, oh, it's very bright. You know, the light comes in from all sides and all. You know, temples are dark. So I said, yeah, temples are dark. Why? So even then I had no inferiority complex about that, but temples are dry. Why? Because there is a reason. It is literally thought to be as Garbhagriha. Garbh is what? It is damp, it is dark, it is moist. It is where the birth is supposed to take place. That's why Garbhagriha is dark. There are no windows in the Garbhagriha. All the windows that you need are in the mandapa. And then you can go outside the temple, you can have all the light in the world, you can sit in the mandap, you know, where actually devotees gather, and you have bhajan, you have all sorts of activities, there is all the light in the world, but Garbhagriha is where you are supposed to shut all light. Because what happens when you go to darshan, if you have ever been to one of the great places in south, even in north now, the volume has increased a lot in all of the temples in last 10 to 15 years. It's amazing how it has increased. Ujjain, Mahakal, it was very easy. 15-20 minutes you would get darshan, everyone would go inside. Now it's a big deal. So instead of some people, you know, bitching about it, I think it's a very good thing to happen. So if you go to many of these places in the south, you have waited for many days to have darshan of the deity. 8 घंटे लाइन में लगे और जब 5 सेकंड आप भगवान के सामने हैं, सडनली जब आपको आंख फाड़ फाड़ के, व्हाट इज द लॉजिकल रैशनल थिंग टू डू, यू आर गेटिंग 5 सेकंड्स, आंख फाड़ फाड़ के देखिए क्या होता है उस समय. हिंदूज डू आंख बंद करके. आई मीन टू वेस्टर्नर्स से कितने स्टूपिड हैं यार, मतलब 5 सेकंड्स यू आर गेटिंग एंड दैट्स व्हेन यू डिसाइड टू क्लोज द आईज. बट दैट इज द एंटायर पॉइंट ऑफ हैविंग दर्शन, because you are supposed to shut out the samsara, shut out the world, turn inside. That external projection, an entire temple, all of Hindu ritual is an external projection of what happens inside human body, including yajna, including temple, including all other structures and institutions that are there. They're supposed to reflect changes that should happen inside your body. And so, what are they supposing? What are they believing? They are supposing here that once you go in front of, once you are having real darshan, you should turn all of your attention inwards. That is why you close your eyes. That is why Garbhagriha is dark. It is not supposed to have light. Because this light which distracts you, actually when you shut your eyes, in meditation what do? Most usually you shut your eyes. Of course there are many advanced yogis who can do it with open eyes, but we are not talking about them. But common people shut their eyes. That's because you shut out, you use all the aids. Why is this eyelid there? You can use it so that to shut out the noise of samsara. That same is there in Garbhagriha. So now let's discuss the most important part of why we go to a temple, of what exactly darshan is, the very act of darshan. Like I said, there is a kalash at the top of the temple, right? Top of the shikhar. Everyone can see it. That's common experience. मंदिर के ऊपर एक कलश होता है. Now why is the कलश there? क्या उसका significance क्या है? It is one of the most important parts of a temple. Some say, scientifically they try to explain it, that some money is hidden or some seeds are hidden, which are then used. Now you could use it for that. But I would argue in this age, Norway has built better seed banks than any temple could function as. So in that case, is the temple redundant? Just like when you scientifize, I'm happy that my bio read that. I'm not a scientist, I do not come from science, but I love to read popular books about science. I respect it greatly. But you should not confuse two epistemologies. For example, Kumbh Mela mein a lot of people say wahan se aisa ray aata hai aur aisa uthta hai waisa uthta. The scientists know it's all bullshit. None of that happens. Ye aisa ray hai 90 degree wo hai. So Raji Malhotra says a very simple thing. If it's science, you can do it in your bathtub. You can recreate it in your bathtub. Then you don't need Kumbh Mela. Kumbh means bathtub. It's entirely possible. So you don't need to go there anymore. So this is not how we should do it. What is the real meaning of that kalash is that kalash is not solid, it's empty from the inside, hollow. And there are seeds, navagraha hote hain, there are seeds. Sometimes there is a little cot, on cot there are navagrahas. But what does that seed mean? Now this Kalash everyone can see. It is at the top. Exactly in this line, a straight line, in the Garbhagriha, underneath the Garbhagriha, underneath the Vigraha, there is another Kalash, which is buried underground. It has the same seats, same Navagraha, that is right there at the top. Right? Exact replica of the Kalash that is at the top, exact replica is there underground. Now why is it that? Because we explained the chakras. And what do the chakras once again represent? It's not like if you open up the spine, you will find some girri. It's not, you're not going to find that. What do the chakras represent? It is supposed that normal human beings like us, our level of consciousness is at the lowest level, which is about basic physical needs and desires, food, sex, and so. That is where it is said that your consciousness is at the level of Mooladhar. The base level where the Shakti is Mooladhar. Now, as you raise your levels of consciousness, you start going up and up and up, and if you reach Sahasrara, you're at the highest level, where you don't see any differentiation, which is the level of moksha, nirvana, self-realization, where you see yourself as Bhagwan, yourself as the deity. So that is the entire process of meditation. What is the problem of existence? The problem of existence is that we see ourselves falsely. We see a false image of ourselves. According to the Hindu Shastras or Hindu cosmology, I think of myself as a male, Pankaj, born in Madhya Pradesh, Indian, so-and-so identities that I have acquired due to this life. Now what does the Hindu wisdom tell me? That all of these identities are acquired, they are not real. They are acquired in this life. If I were to discover my true self with the capital S, I would find that I am the only supreme consciousness in this universe. I am not just higher than this petty self. I am the highest self, in which I am not meaning I am saying all of us. We see ourselves differently due to ignorance. When we realize our true self, we will realize that we are the same supreme consciousness from which all of the universe has descended, from one which is becoming many. So, just simply as that many भेद से अभेद की ओर जाते हैं. So our Hindu disciplines are designed as भेद से अभेद की ओर जाना. The world is created, which we can call as the process of evolution, when one becomes many. Shiv, Parashiv hai. Parashiv in Kashmir Shiv Darshan says, Parashiv, who has no desire to create the universe, first division comes, he becomes Shiva and Shakti. And Shakti then desires to create the universe because Shakti is bored. She wants to play. So when she plays with Shiva, it is called as Chit Shakti Vilas. Chit is form of Shiva and Chit Shakti Vilas. And that's how the entire universe is created. So the entire universe is a result of play of Shiva and Shakti. Simply in Sankhya, it is a play of Purusha and Prakriti. Prakriti creates the entire universe. So in the entire process in almost all of the Hindu cosmological systems and darshanas is the process of one becoming many. So the consciousness, that supreme consciousness of one is supposed to reside in this Kalash that is above the temple. And the individual consciousness of the deity of the Kshetra is supposed to reside here in the Kalash which is underground. And when an Archak invokes, and when you are standing in front of the Garbhagriha with your hands folded and having darshana, what is supposed to happen is that consciousness rises from here and the supreme consciousness descends from above. And in the Vigraha of the deity, Murti of the deity, that's where they combine, that's where they meet. And that exact moment is the act of darshana that happens. This divine ascent and descent of consciousness that happens. Hindi mein se, Sanskrit mein Shaktipat bolte hain. So what is this concept? It's in other communities and other universes would not be very familiar with it. Because here, in very late terms, if you extend one step towards the divine, it is said that the Shakti extends 10 steps. So if you were to sit and meditate, when you take Diksha from a Guru, what happens is not that, it's not simply that you raise your levels of consciousness. When you take first sankalp of taking Diksha from the Guru, because that sankalp has to be yours. When you take first sankalp from the Guru that you are taking Diksha, then the Shakti descends from above, literally so, extends her hand below, take hold of you, pulls you upward. That is the entire process that is happening, ascent and descent of consciousness. So in temple, once again, this is supposed to happen. When the archana happens, when it properly happens, when darshan properly happens, this act of ascent and descent of consciousness is supposed to happen. That's why that kalash at the top is extremely important. That's why that kalash underground is extremely important. And that's why there cannot be just one reason for it. There cannot be just a mundane reason for it. This function cannot be replaced by any new creation. That has to be like this always, forever. Now the same process is reflected in, how much time have I spent? So I forgot when I started. Is 10, 15, okay. Okay, I'll end in 10 minutes, 10, 15 minutes or so. This is Ambika Mata temple in Rajasthan, one of the rarest of temples which completely survived the destruction. Even today it's very difficult to reach this place. Jagat in Udaipur district, near the mountains, near the border of Gujarat. So it's a very dry area. It's near a mountain, very small village it is. It's built in one of the rare temples also, ancient Hindu temple. It's around 900 to 1000 years old, which is built completely in marble. We didn't used to build in marble. Or marble of only certain quality and kinds and places was good enough to build a temple in it. Now marble is preferred because you keep replacing. You don't think of 1000 years, you think of 10 years, 20 years. So everything looks good in 10 and 20 years. Even glass looks very good. So, but earlier we didn't used to build in marble because it was a stone which would go bad very early, just like Taj Mahal is, just in 350, 400 years. So we used to build, the best stone was of course two, granite and sandstone. Now granite is not as good in carving as sandstone is. So sandstone is what most of the temples in north at least are built in. My personal preference is also that, because shorn of all the paints, in yellow and pinkish sandstone, that it gives off the most beautiful hue that is there. After 1200 years they stand so pristine. So this is built in marble. Abhi thoda peela sa lag raha hai because of all the weathering, but it's built in marble. Not a single vigraha is desecrated. This is also 1000 years old. So in all the ASI sites, the plaques that you read, this temple was destroyed in an earthquake. You would know that it's a lie, because earthquakes do not break noses or breasts. It does not hacks off breasts and leaves other parts of the body intact. And I said I wrote once, earthquake is racist, because it builds, destroys only certain kinds of buildings and not the other kinds of building. The mosque which stands right next to it is perfectly fine, but here it's in complete rubble. So this is 1000 years old temple. Not a single vigraha is replaced or desecrated. So everyone should go and see. Absolutely wonderful temple. I went there when it was 46 degrees. Even then it was absolutely wonderful. So here, another symbolism, great symbolism, which conveys the same process which I described now, ascent and descent of consciousness. It's also reflected in temple as a divine tree. Now, how is it a tree? First of all, there is this simple upright tree. There is a seed, jo kalash tha underground. If you consider it as a seed, and Garbhagriha is where the birth takes place, where the first seed is fructified. So if the kalash is there in Garbhagriha, that life comes to form. So similarly, kalash jo niche hai, usse ek ped ugta hai. A tree grows from that seed. And jo kalash upar hai, that will also not be without fruit. It will also bear a tree. Ab wo ulta hai, wahan se a tree upside down also grows. And जंगल में दोनों पेड़ मिलते हैं, दोनों पेड़ के branches मिलते हैं. That's why you see this part as the most, with most number of vigrahas, most number of jumbled sculpture and all of that. So it's a meeting of two trees, one upright, one upside down. And once again, that is a symbol of consciousness rising up and supreme consciousness descending from above. Once again, it's ascent and descent of consciousness. See, everywhere, no matter what discipline you study, it's all about this. They will come sooner or later to this, to different states and levels of consciousness, and how the ascent and descent happens. That is all the symbolism that is there. So one or the other way, they will bring you to this, like bhed se abhed ki or le jate hain. So temple as a divine tree is another important symbol. Temple is a sacrificial fire. This is also most common, but we need to understand the continuity of our civilization in this. R. Nagaswamy wrote a wonderful book, The Vedic Roots of Hindu Iconography. So a lot of leftist scholars, if you see, they say Hinduism itself is a copy of or created by Swami Vivekananda in the 19th century. But that's a serious claim they make. That before that there was no such thing as that. Some oppression going on, but no such dharma that is created in 19th century. But even those who go a little before that, they say when this whole country, had reached a great stage where Buddha had equalized everyone, and then some evil people, and who are they? Any guesses? Huh? Shankaracharya came late. Before that, Brahmanas, they came up, converted Buddhists to this evil society of oppression, and then they created all of this. So there is a very pet theory, because once if any of you go deep into temple architecture and the history of architecture and sculpture, these are very, very ideologically pointed and loaded. Things will be told to you while you are studying a book on architecture and sculpture. So first of all, they say all of it is a copy of Buddhist architecture. It's a blank and plain lie which Kumar Swami 100 years ago completely thoroughly discarded those lies in many of his books. One of his book is the Vedic Roots of Buddhist Iconography. So he says the Buddha himself, all the bhav that he has, he does not differ. It's a common pool, and it's wrong. It's a very Western way, colonial way to see this came from that. We see it, there was a common pool in which the Buddhists took from, in which the Jains took from, in which we took from. There was nobody considered ye pehle aaya usne liya. And he proves it very thoroughly that if you are really bent upon chronology, because they are always bent upon chronology, it's a very biblical habit. Because they always had to postdate everything to Jesus. 2000 साल के बाद में सब कुछ आया. So that's why temples, they claim they came only after 2000 years. All the greatest example. And in architecture, if you go, the oldest complete temples that you will find is 1600 years old or so. So they have managed to sell a lie where they say it was a copy of Buddhist architecture. Now the funny thing is, there is not a single Buddhist temple which exists which predates Hindu temples. Buddhists in India never reached the structural level. So they made chaitya and caves, rock cut architecture they created, but they never graduated to the level of structural when you create a temple through different parts, different stones, and construct a temple, that stage they never reached. There is not a single example of that. So first of all that, Kumar Swami proves that too. But what happened is that we were just like that, we were a very ecological civilization. How old is the temple? I tackled this question 7-8 years ago in an article. We had temples is proved very clearly through Ramayana and Mahabharata. The characters are mentioned as going to Devalaya very clearly. So the word is in both Ramayana and Mahabharata is there, and most conservative dating of Ramayana and Mahabharata would make it what, 3000 at least. मैं कह रहा हूँ उससे पीछे भी मत जाओ. 2800, 2500, 500 BC. So it is pre-Buddha. So Devalaya is mentioned as that. Now, but why do we not find examples of that era? Because we were a very ecological civilization. We used to build in temporary material and dismantle that material after the job was done after a few months. Now, where is this example again seen? In Yagyavedi. Yagyavedi is still, do we have permanent Yagyavedis? No. We create, do Yagya, once it is done, dismantle it. Utsarjan, Visarjan. Ganpati Puja, we do the same. Devi Puja, we do the same. With entire temples, we used to do the same. And so the first examples of temples in stone that you find they copy almost wooden or bamboo architecture. If you go to Mahabalipuram, it seems like a thatched hut, the Draupadi Rath. If you go to Ellora and Ajanta, if you see the roof from inside, it's like an inverted boat. Bamboo का अगर आप बांधेंगे तो जैसा दिखता है वैसे exactly they copied. उसके बाद then they started graduating to more stone like architecture, visible forms of architecture. So built in temporary. But why did we shift? This is also important question. Because when, and Buddhist architecture is not also, nothing about Buddha is found, beyond 2100 or so. Some initial things are found. After that, Buddhists also start building the great era of architecture in India is around, it starts from 4th, 5th century common era, not before that. Most of the Buddhist caves are also from that era only. So when Buddhists who didn't refuse to talk about Atma and Brahma, talked about Anatma or Anatta, Atma और ब्रह्म की reality को भी नहीं discuss करना, but they very ironically started building monoliths, first not of Buddha, but huge Chaitya, and then monoliths of Buddha also all over India. जो अनात्मा की बात करते हैं, जो आत्मा की भी बात करने से रिफ्यूज करते हैं, वो सबसे बड़े बुद्ध की मूर्तियां पूरे भारत में बनाने लगे. And when they started leaving those imprints, then once again my theory is that Sanatana would have thought that if we do not respond to this emergency, even we would have believed right now that we were all Buddhists at one point of time, and these Dushta Brahmanas came and then converted all of us to this system. But because at that time they responded, and they responded so well that in each and every street of India, street of our towns and villages, there was a great temple. If you go to Karnataka, Tamil Nadu, even after all this destruction, there are lakhs and lakhs of these examples. And one Chalukya inscription actually directly defies the Islamic invaders. And they say, just like reminiscence of Kitne Afjal Maroge, and that inscription says, how many temples will the militias break? We will create one in every village. And that's what they did. And that's how we know, after all the destruction. Imagine the grit of that civilization, sheer grit. Refusal to get defeated and destroyed in any case. This is what they created. So, coming back to the point after taking that aside, this is sacrificial fire. Hindu temple is a continuity of the Yajna Vedi. The shape and the very building of the temple is a direct continuity of the Yajna Vedi, fire in a Yajna Vedi. What happens in a home, in a Yajna? That there is fire, first of all there is a fire, and if you see this structure, it's supposed to be a fire that is permanently lit in a Yajna Vedi. Yajna Vedi is a square, most temples are most commonly square. So a square Yajna Vedi and a fire emerging out of it. And in that fire, what do? You invoke a deity. So man roop se आप एक deity को invoke करते हैं. That in Agni, that deity is supposed to, come, and after that you do all the other rituals. So temple, when other eras came, when it was became a little impossible for most people to perform yajna or to take benefit of it, then this era came when they started creating these temples where it is supposed to be a permanently lit form of that Vedic Yagni in a Yajna Vedi, where a priest officiates for you. You have to maintain some charya, but not like that of a priest, and you can take all the benefits of it, you can take all the phala of it. So this is how it is also maintained as a sacrificial fire. Why am I telling you this? Because it's a direct continuation from the Vedas. It is a direct continuation of the Vedic Sanskriti. There is no break. Because a lot of people think, including some of our own, some very good-hearted people, that there is a break. For example, a lot of people you say, oh, we are Vedic people. We don't worship idols. And entire organizations like Arya Samaj, they say, building temples and these priests and all, it's the degradation and we should do away with the temple. To the point now, I'm friends with, I'm not speaking against the organization or the people, I'm friends with many of them. They are doing absolutely wonderful job in fighting the antisocial elements in north in many places. But before independence, they had reached a point. Sita Ramji's point of revulsion was that they had started abusing temples and deities so much to the point where their followers would sometimes go and relieve in the garbhagriha of a temple in a village to show that they hate the concept this much. So it's very important to know that temple is a continuation of the Vedic Sanskriti. A direct descendant of the Vedic Sanskriti, it's not a break. Puranas are not a break from the Vedas, they are a continuity. Our civilization in all of that is a continuity. It's very important to know and understand. And right now, even today, it remains one of the most central institutions. Now, I will discuss one or two creative parts of temple building. After that, I will open up to questions. This is not too much. Do not get scared about what it is, but just some ingenuity of architecture, and even at that time what they did. Staggering. Now there is this technique of staggering. So staggering simple. इसका आपको देख के जितना समझ में आया उतना ठीक है. Focus on this, if you will. Now a temple has 4 sides, right? One side is a gate. So that side is gone in the opening. Mostly it is in the opening. You have 3 sides. Now Hindus were never satisfied in having enough space. 3 साइड हैं, इस पर स्कल्पचर बनाओ, उससे सेटिस्फैक्शन नहीं हो रहा. They wanted to create more space. Now how do you create more space? There is this wall, flat plain wall. How do you create more space? You take the central part of it and move it forward. Now how many spaces do you have? 1, 2, upwards, 3, and then जो 2 पीछे left behind, the part of the wall that is left behind. 5. Suddenly you have 5 spaces. There was 1 space. You take the central part, understood this part? Central part of the wall, move it forward, suddenly there are 5 spaces. फिर उसका बीच का और part लिया, you move it forward, you have 7 spaces. एक बार और आगे बढ़े, you have 9 spaces. So generally, they extend until to 9, at some places 11, but 9 spaces, 7 spaces तक they extend करते हैं. This is called as staggering. Now this staggering works in not just temple walls, it works in pillars, it works everywhere. For example, खजुराहो चलते हैं वापस. अब यहाँ क्या किया है? If it had been just a simple square wall, केवल यही होता, उसको बीच में देखो, ये अंदर है धंसा हुआ है, इसको एक बार आगे लाए, एंड इसको दूसरी बार आगे लाए, फिर उसको यहाँ पर बीच में तीसरी बार आगे लाए. This is what staggering is. There are other example also. Here you can see. This is the wall. इसको बीच में से आगे लाए, this, and then आगे लाए, this space. So this is staggering. ये common practice है temple architecture में. They keep using it. इससे बड़े interesting spaces create होते हैं. Spaces which are at the center, spaces which are looking sideways. जो sideways हैं, वहाँ पर less important deities या less important characters हैं. जैसे कोई सुंदरी है, मदनिका है, कोई सुर सुंदरी है, they will be at that. चमर बैरर हैं जो पंखा जल रहे हैं, वो साइड में होंगे. उनका पंखा आएगा इस साइड, बट वो साइड में होंगे, बीच में डीटी होंगे. और कुछ ऐसे जो घटनाएं होंगी, पौराणिक स्टोरीज दे विल डिपिक्ट ऑन रिसेस. तो एक प्रोजेक्शन एंड रिसेस में लेस इंपॉर्टेंट, प्रोजेक्शन जस्ट 1 स्पेस, बट दे क्रिएटेड मैनी, सो दैट टू show the gradient, show the less importance, more importance of particular stories. Here the same. ये एक टेम्पल है, नॉर्थ इंडियन टेम्पल. ना उसको आप ऐसे फैला दें, ये पास में से ये पिलर निकल आया, ये निकल आया, और इसको और अगर आप ये जो दिस मूवमेंट इज, इसमें से और आप चीजें निकाल सकते हैं. द मोर इट इज. सेकेंड इज रोटेशन. अब रोटेशन क्या है? एक ग्रेट प्रॉब्लम है. हाउ टू टर्न, ये यज्ञ में भी है, हमारे मैथमेटिक्स में भी है, अर्लीस्ट उसमें, हाउ टू टर्न अ स्क्वायर इनटू अ सर्कल, बिकॉज दैट इज अ ग्रेट प्रॉब्लम. अगेन एंड अगेन वो टेम्पल में भी इनकाउंटर करते हैं. तो ये स्क्वायर है, अब आपने उसको एक बार स्क्वायर को ऊपर उठाया, रोटेट किया, नीचे रख दिया, तो देन सडनली यू हैव 4 की जगह 8 कॉर्नर्स. फिर उसको एक बार और उठाया, फिर ऐसे रख दिया, एंड देन यू ये परफेक्ट स्टार नहीं है, ये परफेक्ट स्टार है. 2, 3 जब आप ऐसे कर लेते हैं, 16 पॉइंटेड स्टार जब वो क्रिएट होता है, तो दिस इज रोटेशन. रोटेशन से भी आप इतना कर सकते हैं. इसमें आपको इतने सारे कोने मिल गए, जो 4 थे, 4 के इतने सारे कोने मिल गए. ऑफ कोर्स 1 साइड विल बी गेट, दिस विल बी, ये तो क्योंकि एंट्री तो होगी ना कहीं से, तो ये गर्भगृह का द्वार होगा, और ये 3 साइड पे होगा. मैं अभी आपको, आई एम सॉरी आई कुड नॉट पुट, डम्बल दोड बसप्पा temple है कर्नाटक में, which is a 16 pointed star, absolutely wonderful complete star that they first time created, which is replicated at some places then. So rotation is the other thing. These are some certain techniques. Fractal geometry is again there. Fractal geometry का क्या meaning है? So for example, in not going too much into fractal geometry, but here ये एक शिखर है, शिखर के अंदर एक शिखर, इस शिखर के अंदर if you will magnify there will be another शिखर and sometimes they go to 5 times their seed. तो the purpose is to convey, जो हमारे यहाँ एक हिंदी में भी बड़े आम रूप से कहते हैं पिंड में ब्रह्मांड. The purpose is to convey that you do not need to know the entire universe in order to know the highest reality. You know, every part of this universe reflects the entire universe if you just know how to look correctly. So to convey that sense, entire temple is built of so the various kinds of temples, थोड़ा सा this will in 7 or 8 minutes we will run through it. कौन-कौन से temples होते हैं? नागर शिखर में 3 मेजर स्टाइल हैं. मोस्ट कॉमन लतिन, शेखरी एंड भूमिज. लतिन में क्या होगा, ये उड़ीसा का है बट वो बाकी सारे स्टाइल्स भी, लतिन इज द मोस्ट कॉमन स्टाइल. बीच में एक लता होगी, लता इज क्रीपर, और लता किसकी होगी, जनरली वो गवाक्ष लता होती है. गवाक्ष इज अ फॉल्स विंडो. हॉर्स शू शेप आपको कभी भी टेंपल में जाएंगे, एक चैत्य जैसा हॉर्स शू शेप बार बार देखेंगे, उसकी लता को हम लतिन बोलते हैं. तो बीच में एक लता होती है, फिर उसको भी आप स्टैगरिंग करके कई उसमें लेवल तक कर सकते हैं. दिस इज द मोस्ट कॉमन. शेखरी में इट्स जस्ट अ कलेक्शन ऑफ शिखर. तो इसमें कई शिखर क्लाइम, जैसे जो रियल माउंटेन होता है उसमें भी क्या होता है, मैनी पिक्स. इसमें भी शेखरी में मैनी पिक्स क्लाइम डाउन टुवर्ड्स द टॉप. झुरमुट होता है, शिखर का झुरमुट होता है. थर्ड भूमिज. भूमिज थोड़ा मिक्सचर है द्रविड़ और उसका साउथ की स्टाइल का भी. टीयर्स ऑफ पिरामिड होते हैं शिखर के, जैसे इसमें एक दिख रहा है, ऐसा 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 ऐसे टीयर्स होते हैं और बीच में एक लता होती है. और दूसरा ये फंक्शन है, ये सिंपल पिरामिडल. रूफ में आपने एक स्लैब रखा, उससे छोटा रखा, उससे छोटा रखा, छोटा रखा. दिस इज अर्लीस्ट सिंपलेस्ट फॉर्म. सबसे अर्लीस्ट टेम्पल्स ऐसे ही मिलते हैं. ये वल्लभी है. जो गोपुरम देखा, गोपुरम का जो स्ट्रक्चर है दैट इज वल्लभी. ये देवी के, ये रेक्टेंगुलर, इसका जो बेस होता है वह रेक्टेंगुलर होता है. तो जनरली अ लॉट ऑफ शाक्त टेम्पल्स वर बिल्ट लाइक इन दिस फॉर्म. दे वर डेडिकेटेड टू दिस फॉर्म. और अगर कोई लेटे हुए आप फॉर्म बताना है आपको, जैसे अनंत शयन विष्णु या ऐसा कोई फॉर्म है, तो उसके लिए भी रेक्टेंगुलर फॉर्म यूज करना है, तो शिखर उस पर ऐसा ही बांधा जाएगा. बट मोस्ट कॉमनली शाक्त फॉर्म में यूज होता है. लतिन का ये एक एग्जाम्पल है, मुक्तेश्वर टेम्पल. उसमें ये देखिए, ये जो गवाक्ष ऊपर दिख रहे हैं, कल बहुत दिखेंगे हमको. तो एक चीज आई कैन प्रॉमिस, इन यूपी में जो बचा है उसमें गवाक्ष, और बाकी तो सब इज गॉन. शेखरी, द वंस अगेन द ब्रिलियंट कंदरीय महादेव. ये देखिए छोटे छोटे शिखर क्लाइंबिंग अप टू द टॉप. और ये खजुराहो का ग्रेटेस्ट, खजुराहो का सॉरी छत्तीसगढ़ का खजुराहो बोलते हैं इसको, भोरामदेव. भोरामदेव में ये बीच में एक पतला सा लता है गवाक्षी, और ये छोटे छोटे शिखर. वल्लभी, ये ग्वालियर का माय बर्थ प्लेस, तेली का मंदिर. इट इज द हाईएस्ट वल्लभी टेम्पल एवर बिल्ट इन इंडिया. फॉर्मसन, ये खजुराहो में एक और मंदिर है, सिंपल पिरामिडल टीयर्स. अब इसका मतलब ये नहीं है कि वी आर रिस्ट्रिक्टेड. सो वंस अगेन, Hindu Shastras reflect the practice. They are not normative texts. The most fundamental difference between us and them is that first the text comes and then it commands people to be a certain way, and that way of life is forced upon them. We are not like this. First there is practice, then the Shastras come up, taking the most refined of that practice, and then it is there to guide us till a very long time. So that's how it has been. That is why new things come up all the time. तो ऐसा नहीं है कुछ नया नहीं आ सकता, बट दैट हैज टू पास द टेस्ट ऑफ वैलिडिटी, दैट इज स्टिल कन्वेज द मीनिंग ऑफ द इंस्टीट्यूशन विच इट इज रिप्रेजेंटिंग. तो ये है 64 योगिनी. कई शाक्त मंदिर, अलग अलग आर्किटेक्चर होते हैं. एक सिंपल प्रैक्टिकल, अभी गोल क्यों है, गोल का एक सिंपल प्रैक्टिकल है. 64 योगिनी आपको उसमें गर्भगृह बनाने हैं. हाउ डू यू बिल्ड 64? इट विल बिकम अ हॉरिबल जंबल अगर आप ऐसे ही करेंगे. बट देन सर्कुलर अगर आप बनाते हैं, तो बीच में शिव है, या कई बार 4 जो महायोगिनी है वो हैं और उनके बीच में शिव है या भैरव है, और चारों ओर योगिनी. ये जो मंदिर है ये मुरैना का, मितावली का है. तो इसमें सर्कुलर टेम्पल बनता है. लॉट ऑफ पीपल से दैट इंडियाज पार्लियामेंट इज बेस्ड ऑन दिस. मतलब there is nothing to deny or affirm this, but it's a circular model, you know, not very difficult to conceive and do. So I would not say it's a copy, but yeah, this of course is 1000 years old, not 75 years old. This is a Dravid Shikhar. Dravid Shikhar is pyramidal tiers and then many articulations based on each and every of that tier. जो डोम होता है ये सबसे ऊपर होता है. डोम is generally square, circular, octagonal, 8 sides, 4 sides and also square. Other sides also, but these are the most common. Vesar is a mixture of the two. Vesar शब्द भी talks about mixture. तो कर्नाटक में it only used to exist in Karnataka. Now they are building it at other places. ये डम्बल दोड बसप्पा जो मैंने कहा ये उसका रिप्रेजेंटेशन है. तो इसमें क्या होता है कि a little of the pyramidal tiers and little of North Indian architecture, they mix the two. Vesar. अब कुछ एग्जाम्पल देखेंगे. द्रविड़ टेम्पल का बृहदेश्वर टेम्पल थंजावुर. इट इज़ सो फार द हाईएस्ट स्टैंडिंग हिंदू टेम्पल. जब कोणार्क खजुराहो पूरा बना रहा होगा तो वो इससे हायर था, बट देन इट गॉट डिस्ट्रॉयड. अभी तो केवल यू सी द जगमोहन, द मंडप, इट वॉज द हाईएस्ट एंशंट हिंदू टेम्पल दैट वी नो ऑफ. अभी बृहदेश्वर टेम्पल. वेसर शिखर ये सोमनाथपुर में, मैसूर के पास में सोमनाथपुर है. त्रिकूट है, एक और टेम्पल है पीछे, वो इसके पीछे दिख नहीं रहा है, बट दिस इज हाउ इट इज. Once again we'll run through Bhaddeshwar temple Thanjavur, different sites of it. This is another Bhaddeshwar temple. First one was built by Rajraj Chol, this one was built by his son. It is smaller but more exquisite in sculpture and other things. This is Shiva, tying the hair of the king, so bestowing anugrah on him. Pancharath Mahabalipuram. Here you see this Draupadi temple. It has nothing to do with Draupadi. वो तो 5 दिखे तो 5 पांडव, ये आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट ने किया है 20th century में. वो सब ऐसा द्रौपदी का टेम्पल नहीं था वो. तो 2 दिखे तो सास बहू, कुछ भी. तो यहाँ उनका कोई सास बहू से लेना देना नहीं. बहुत सारे सास बहू हैं नॉर्थ इंडिया. मेरे ग्वालियर में सास बहू हैं. हमको मजा भी बहुत आता था बचपन में. तो सास बहू टेम्पल उदयपुर में भी, नागदा में सास बहू है. वो सहस्र भाव भी जो स्कॉलर्स हैं उसको भी मना करते हैं, कहते हैं वो उसका भी अपभ्रंश नहीं है, तो कहीं से आया है. वो जो टेक्स्ट में ग्वालियर वाला जो है हरिहर पूरा मेंशन है उसका, अलग ही उसका मेंशन है. तो वो ऐसा होता था जनरली, इफ देयर इज वन शिव टेम्पल देन अनदर वन वुड कम. विष्णु का एक मंदिर भी बनाएंगे. अगर एक वन वैष्णव टेम्पल है, दूसरा आके शिव का भी बनाएंगे. जनरली 2 ग्रेटेस्ट संप्रदायस दैट वर देयर. तो वो बैलेंस करते थे और उसको सास बहू कह दिए, आर्कियोलॉजिस्ट जो भी कहते हैं. बट दिस इज सिंबल ऑफ, जैसा थैश्ड रूफ की तरह है वैसा आपको स्ट्रक्चर दिखेगा. शो टेम्पल, पिरामिडल टियर्स, और इसका बहुत आर्टिकुलेशन होता है. मैं उसमें डीप में नहीं जा रहा. अगर आप द्रविड़ आर्किटेक्चर में जाएंगे तो कूट शाल पंजर बेसिक टर्मिनोलॉजी यहाँ पर स्पष्ट नहीं दिख रहा. ये जो स्क्वायर डोम है वो कूट है, बीच वाला जो लंबा दिख रहा है ये शाल है, और इसके बीच में जो स्ट्रक्चर दिख रहा है वो पंजर है. उसका अवर साइड पंजर है, वो हम कभी बाद में समझेंगे. नो नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड नाउ. बट द्रविड़ आर्किटेक्चर जितना आपको बेफडल करता है, जितना कंफ्यूज करता है, इफ यू अंडरस्टैंड दिस कूट शाल पंजर, you have understood everything. Shore temple. The ocean used to destroy it a lot, so one good thing that they did, ASI, they built this embankment, so now it's safer. Descent of Ganga, painted on a rock nearby. Mahishasur Mardani panel, one of the earliest of this beauty. You can see the direction, look at that. The demon coiling in horror, all that, you can see the direction so very clearly. In such a very, this is not even high relief, this is low relief. Low relief में इतना अच्छा कन्वे किया. कैलाशनाथ कांचीपुरम is one of the greatest temples ever created in द्रविड़ idiom. अभी तक हिंदू टेम्पल इससे ऊपर नहीं गया है द्रविड़ श्रृंखला में अगर हम कहें तो. This is around 1300 years old. So well made, so absolutely critically imagined and executed कि इससे ऊपर हम नहीं गए. Sculpture, architecture, painting and everything. ये भिक्षाटन मूर्ति शिव की. श्री रंगनाथ स्वामी, And now when the invasions became more, we adapted to it. So a lot of Dravid architecture is built to, their temples are built like forts. So what did they do? Main temple is small. Around that there is a courtyard. So they created a square courtyard around it. Enclosed it with 4 walls. 4 walls में 4 gates. उसके बाहर एक और बनाया, उसके बाहर एक और. And Rangnath Swami, there are 7. First of all, you can incorporate a lot of devotees within. जब आप जाएंगे तो कई बार you will have to, if there is more crowd, ऐसे ऐसे कई सारे courtyards में से होके अंदर आना पड़ेगा. But if an attack happens, by the time they are, in the 7th, in the Garbhagriha, they had these ways, they had tunnels, जिससे वो मेन विग्रह जो मूर्ति है वो बचाकर वो ले जाते थे. By the time the invaders fought their way to the center of the temple. This is so big. This is the outermost gopuram of Sri Ranganath Swami Tiruchirappalli. When the first time I went, actually bus can enter this gopuram. So when I entered, bus was inside. I was literally inside the temple. There were banks, shops, वो खाने की shops थी, चप्पल की shops थी, ATM थे, bank थे, and I was inside the temple. So it is said about the temple is not within the city is within the temples, and really feels so. Almost half of the island they have covered. It is so huge, it is so big. Arunachaleshwar, Tiruvannamalai, the entire city is supposed, and you can see it from above also, supposed to have come around the temple. Entire economy is this. 2 lakh, 2.5 lakh kuch population hai. I think 90% of it exists to serve the temple. If the temple would not be there, 90% of that would. When they ask that, इससे क्या होगा, hospital बनाइए. Meenakshi Amman, this is once again the most famous of the Gopurams. Absolutely wonderful temples. Later, Gopurams were made in 18th, 19th century, but they are done very well. Kandari Mahadev, another shot. Achha, these were all Panchayatan temples. What is the concept of Panchayatan temple? There were, during the medieval era, 5 great sampradayas. What were they? Vaishnava, Shaiva, Ganpatya, dedicated to Ganpati, Saurya, dedicated to Surya, and Shakti, Shakta, dedicated to Devi, Bhagavati. Just so that orthodoxy of one would never be created. Monotheism would never be created. So what they did, if the main temple was of Vishnu, all 4 other deities would be on all 4 sides. If the main temple would be of Bhagavati or Shiva or Ganpati, all other 4 deities would be there. So you would not have this feeling in your mind that other deities, should not be worshipped. They are always there. Of course, you should focus on one, but all others are always there. Now the composition of these 5 deities also changes at certain places. अब जैसे contemporary era में कई जगह हनुमान आ जाते हैं, other temples aa jate hain, which is okay, which is all the freedom that we have. But the concept is that, so you never let this orthodoxy get created. Duladev, this is Saptarat plan. ये देखो, मतलब ये सप्त से ज़्यादा दिखेगा, but वो other side भी आप देख रहे हैं. You are seeing staggering from that side also. यहाँ से भी आप ऐसा ही उसको देख रहे हैं. तो इतना deep तक जाते थे articulation. दूल्हा ये भी खजुराहो में. अब once again, why Duladev nobody knows. वो ज़्यादा उन्हें शिव की बारात के शायद पैनल्स मिले, सो दूल्हा देव. आदिनाथ टेम्पल, दिस इज अ जैन टेम्पल. ये लतिन वैरायटी आपको बहुत क्लियरली दिख रही है. बीच में ये लता, क्रीपर. These are the walls, अंतराल of खजुराहो. Bateshwar, near my work, 20 kilometers away, very famous, made by K.K. Mohammed ji. He renovated that. And earlier they surmised 210 temples used to stand at one platform, 1400 to 1300 years old, 210 temples at one platform. Abhi, when I started visiting, and they are doing absolutely wonderful work there, when I started visiting, they had 40 temples. Now they have resurrected, renovated 60 temples, 20 more. They have come up with 60 now. They are doing more. Not all 210 will be possible, but at least this will be one of the greatest clusters of temples anywhere. Mudhara, they used to build Kalyanis also, and they would convert every part of the temple. Kalyani's temple tank, every part of the temple architecture is one of it. For example, ये हम उतर रहे हैं, उसके steps में एक और temple है. ऐसे कई सारे small temples दिखेंगे, जिसमें कहीं शिवलिंग, कहीं छोटे deities, ऐसा बहुत सारा आपको मिलेगा. Lord Surya, ये सूर्य मंदिर ही था. रानी की वाव, बावड़ी. If anyone has been to Rani ki Vav, matlab it's a well which is very necessary. So this debate also in the West, which is very famous, if you go to arts, study humanities and arts, art for art's sake or art for utility's sake. But we never had this. Every art, you could not imagine art without utility, you could not imagine utility without elevating it to artistic part. Similar was our life just around 40-50 years ago. So I once wrote a piece on the changing artifacts in your drawing room window. Abhi, you have articles which are especially made to display and for nothing else. 50 years ago, you would have items there which were of daily use. Bartan rakhte the. And nobody was shy, they were proud. And those utensils were actually of great use. They were also decorated. They were not as plain and simple as they are now. They were decorated. आपका घर का जो द्वार है, that was very decorated. Everything that you did was artistic. Nothing that was artistic was of no use. ऐसा ये division था ही नहीं. But now, when you make your life so sterile of art, then you need museums to soak in all art and architecture. So Rani Kebab, this is a baudi which is used to store water, and look at what exquisite sculpture, Vaman Avatar, and look at this Mahishasur Mardini. ये तो बावड़ी थी ना, तो उससे ढक दिया चूने पत्थर से, तो बच गया है, लगभग पूरा is intact, otherwise तो ये भी नहीं बचता. Oshia, Rajasthan is, you know, mine of this. Oshia is one of the greatest places for this temple. The Jagiya Mata temple. Earlier it used to be a Vishnu temple, अभी ये जगिया माता टेम्पल. अंबिका टेम्पल हम देख चुके हैं. Once again सास बहू टेम्पल, ये नागदा वाला है, जो हाँ जो उदयपुर के पास में है. This is ये जो classical styles के beyond भी हैं. पहाड़ी जो architecture styles, because it snows and rains a lot, so of course it has this pagoda style architecture. तो ये आप मनाली में जाएंगे या हिमाचल के कई टेम्पल्स में जाएंगे, बहुत सुंदर आर्किटेक्चर ऐसा आपको देखने को मिलेगा. और वह पहाड़ों में, लेकिन ये स्टाइल भी है. और उसमें क्या करते हैं, द इवन इन स्टोन दे रिफ्लेक्ट दिस पैगोडा स्टाइल. Kashmir, which is very little left of it, ruins in absolutely pathetic conditions, but this was a very unique style. These temples have ऐसे triangular ऊपर गेट के ऊपर triangular shapes हैं जिसको architecture में pediment बोलते हैं. Now that's a very important part of Greek architecture. So then once again it leads to a lot of scholars say कि oh it was all inspired by, you know, Alexander came and his horses left something here in India and we created this architecture and all of that. But that is once again stupid. What we do is that we adapt according to the kshetra. When in Gandhara, in what is now Afghanistan, there was a lot of influence of that kind of architecture. So when we built in Kashmir, we incorporated that architecture there. So here in Kashmiri architecture, you will see a lot of Greek elements. In Mauryan architecture, you will see a lot of Greek elements. So we adapted to the local architecture, respecting it, and did not copy it from that. Because the basic elements, basic structure is still the same in Tamil Nadu as in Kashmir. This is post-Mughal, after the destruction in Bengal. Bengal, the first layer is completely gone, destroyed. Second layer, they come up with these terracotta temples, a square with these corridors and beautiful sculptures and Ramayana and Mahabharata and Bhagavad stories in terracotta. Pithargaon, we are going to see this today. सब घर बना लिए आसपास. It's very difficult to even reach this place. ढूंढने में नहीं आता. मैप पे लिखा हुआ है पता नहीं कौन सा कुछ स्मेल्टिंग वर्क और ऐसा कुछ है, कुछ टेम्पल भी नहीं आता है. But we'll go, we'll see. This is one of the earliest brick temples in India. So Kanpur actually is fortunate. ये कैसे बचा क्या, कुछ फ्लड प्लेन है गंगा का, बाढ़ आती है, इतना ऊंचा टेम्पल नहीं था, सब मलबे में दब गया. That's how it was saved and later on they excavated it. Bhuramdev, ये जो हमने देखा था छत्तीसगढ़ में. Kailashnath and Ellora, rock cut 2, one of the greatest wonders ever created in stone. 2-storied, every single, more than 160,000 sculptures in a single temple, all carved out from single stone. That's how wonderful it is. Virupaksh Pattadakal, there is a story behind this altar. This is just the Jagmohan, this is just the mandap of the temple. ये जो कोणार्क आप देखते हैं ना, ये पूरा टेम्पल तो है ही नहीं, पीछे शिखर और बहुत बड़ा था, बहुत एक्सक्विजिट था. That's gone now. लिंगराज भुवनेश्वर. So the शिखर would have been something like this. और ये जो जगमोहन आपको दिख रहा है ऐसा. जगन्नाथपुरी, the same. एलिफेंटा, ये अर्धनारीश्वर. ये जो पीछे डिस्ट्रॉयड है, तो जब पोर्चुगीज आए तो देयर सोल्जर्स would be stationed here in the caves and they would do target practice on all of these vigrahas. So everything is gone horribly destroyed like this. All of them. ये तो ऊपर से फेस पे नहीं किया, ये सब टारगेट कई फेस पे भी किया है, केवल सदाशिव को छोड़ा है जो सबसे बड़ा मूर्ति है, बाकी सबको ये दिस वाज डिस्ट्रॉयड बाय पोर्चुगीज, नॉट बाय इस्लामिक इन्वेडर्स. केवल इनको छोड़ा है. पंचमुखी शिव है सपोज टू बी, वन इज हिडन, अनदर इज इनविजिबल. वीर नारायण टेम्पल बेलावाड़ी, वन ऑफ द ग्रेट हॉयसर टेम्पल्स इन कर्नाटका. ये त्रिकूट है, तीसरा टेम्पल है, वो बहुत पीछे, 3 मंडप हैं तो इसलिए वो दिख नहीं रहा है. चैनकेशव हम देख चुके हैं, केदारेश्वर अनदर त्रिकूट. एंड देन वंस अगेन दिस केरला स्कूल, इट इज ऑल्सो डिफरेंट फ्रॉम जो हमने डिस्कस किए हैं, सिमिलर टू द्रविड़ आर्किटेक्चर, जो पूरा प्लान है, बट एक्चुअली इस तरह के जो स्लोपिंग रूफ्स हैं. और ये लेक के ये जो फेमस कसरगोड जो आपने बाबिया, वो जो वेजिटेरियन crocodile है, if you have heard about that story. So this temple is always has a vegetarian crocodile who doesn't eat any sort of fish or meat. और वो पूरे अपने लाइफ साइकिल जीता है. When it dies within 9 to 10 months another one appears in the pond, in this pond. तो अभी पिछले ही साल दूसरा आया है. तो एक हमने जब देखा था, he died 1 month after it and then another one came up. So this temple is very famous for this. Thank you. This is